Welcome to Six Path Weeb, where we reimagine the shinobi world through a different lens. Today, we explore a fascinating divergence from the original timeline. What if Naruko Uzumaki, the spirited, misunderstood Jinchuriki, had been trained not by Kakashi, Jiraiya, or Iruka, but by Anko Mitarashi? Known for her unpredictable nature, sharp instincts, and shadowy past under Orochimaru, Anko is a kunoichi shaped by hardship and resilience. Under her guidance, how would Naruko's development shift? Would her playful defiance evolve into a more calculated edge? Would her bond with the Nine Tails take a darker turn, or would she rise even faster, mastering forbidden techniques and unorthodox strategies? This isn't just a change in mentorship, it's a shift in identity, power, and destiny. Disclaimer: the content on this channel is intended for entertainment and discussion purposes only. I do not own any of the anime footage used in this video. All rights and credits belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Let's begin. A quiet sigh escaped the lips of a young girl as she sat near two small memorial stones. Naruko Uzumaki, usually known for her boundless energy and cheerful demeanor, now appeared unusually quiet and reflective. Many who knew her saw her as a spirited, often unpredictable presence, but in this moment, her eyes held a mature solemnity. She looked over the two graves she had carefully prepared, her thoughts turning to the recent battle that had changed her perspective. To protect someone precious. The idea echoed in her heart. Though Zabuza had tried to appear distant, it was clear that Haku had meant a great deal to him. Haku had willingly stepped forward to protect Zabuza, showing Naruko the depth of loyalty and care one could have for another. The realization stirred something deep within her. She understood now, true strength wasn't just about power or technique, but also the resolve to protect those who mattered. Still, one truth lingered: she hadn't been strong enough. Had Haku truly fought at full strength, she wouldn't have stood a chance. That truth left an impression. Determined to grow stronger, Naruko reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, hand-carved amulet. Haku had given it to her during their unexpected meeting in the forest. She stared at it for a long moment, her grip tightening as a serious look took over her face. No more holding back, she whispered with quiet determination. Then, taking a kunai, she lightly grazed her palm, not enough to injure, but just enough for a symbolic vow, allowing a small trace of energy to mark the moment as she held her hand over the grave. I promise to grow stronger and protect those I care about. Thank you, Haku. With a silent bow of respect, Naruko stood and walked behind the graves, retrieving the massive Kubi Kiribocho sword from the earth. It was surprisingly heavy for her, but she managed to lift it with some effort. Carrying it openly would be impractical, so she reached into her backpack for a storage scroll, one of her most useful tools, though rarely used until now. Before sealing the weapon, she examined it carefully. The blade was nearly taller than she was, with a long handle and distinctive cutouts along the top and guard. What caught her attention most, however, were the unfamiliar sealing patterns engraved across its surface. Intrigued by the complex symbols, she made a mental note to study them when she returned to the village. A quick set of hand signs and a spark of chakra later, and the blade vanished into the scroll with a flash. She tucked the scroll securely into her orange jacket and turned to rejoin her team. The next morning, Team 7 departed the Land of Waves. 1 week later, Hokage's office. After the official debriefing, with the basic mission report completed and their teammates dismissed, Kakashi and Naruko remained behind to give a more detailed account of the events that took place on the bridge. So, the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, began, his expression curious but calm. What really happened during the final moments of the mission? Kakashi gave a casual shrug while Naruko appeared a little hesitant. Then, gathering her courage, she answered clearly. I used some of the Nine Tails chakra. Sarutobi's eyes widened slightly. For a moment, worry flickered in his gaze, an understandable reaction. The idea of the nine-tailed fox influencing its host had always been a matter of great concern. However, Naruko offered a reassuring smile. Don't worry, Grandpa, she said kindly, using her usual nickname for the Hokage. The seal is perfectly fine, and the fox didn't force anything. In fact, it offered to help me. That last sentence left both men momentarily speechless. With a deep breath, Naruko explained. Flashback, Naruko's mindscape, during the bridge battle. She found herself in the familiar, echoing halls of her inner world, a place resembling an old sewer, lit with a faint, ethereal glow. Though she was in the middle of a fierce battle in reality, something had pulled her into this space. Standing before the massive cage that held the nine-tailed fox, Naruko spoke plainly. I don't have time for distractions, Fox. What do you want? To her surprise, the fox looked back at her not with hostility, but with a weary expression. I'm not here to argue, the fox replied in a deep, even voice. I don't have the energy for it. And surprisingly, I want to help. Naruko blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Help? Why? I see potential in you. I'm offering you a portion of my power, but I want something in return. Naruko narrowed her eyes, wary. What do you want? The fox chuckled softly. Smart girl. All I ask is to be allowed to connect with your senses occasionally. And maybe have someone to talk to. I might even assist with your training. She considered it for a long moment before nodding. Deal. The fox's grin widened slightly. You trust too easily, but you've got good instincts. I give you my word, I'll assist you however I can. Dash. End flashback. And that's how I managed to keep up in the battle, Naruko explained. Haku ultimately chose to intervene against Kakashi-sensei's move. To protect someone important to her. The third Hokage rested his forehead on his hand, thoughtful. Everything Naruko described made sense, and as ancient beings, tailed beasts were bound by their word. I understand. If anything changes with the seal or your connection, report it to me immediately. Both Kakashi and Naruko nodded. Kakashi then turned to leave, but Naruko lingered behind. Something else, Naruko? Sarutobi asked, sounding a bit weary from the mountain of paperwork on his desk. Yes. I was wondering if you could help me find a sword instructor. The request was simple, but her tone was serious. The Hokage raised an eyebrow in interest, motioning her to continue. Naruko pulled out her scroll and, with a puff of chakra, revealed the massive blade. Because I don't think most sword experts would know how to handle this kind of weapon. His eyes briefly widened at the sight of the legendary blade before returning to a calm state. I see, he replied gently. Unfortunately, we don't have any active swordmasters in the village who specialize in Zanbato-style blades. But I believe I still have a scroll or two that could help you start. Naruko's eyes lit up with excitement. Oh. And? Do you have anything more advanced on sealing techniques? I already finished the beginner's book you gave me. You completed the basics already? He asked, clearly impressed. Yep. It was easier than I thought. But the sword has seals I've never seen before, and I want to understand them. A smile formed on Sarutobi's face. He had hoped she'd develop an interest in sealing, as it was something that ran in her lineage. He stood and walked over to a nearby shelf, pulling out a small black book filled with carefully penned knowledge. I think this will inspire you, he said warmly, handing it to her. Naruko held the book with both hands, her heart full of purpose. She would become stronger, not just for herself, but for everyone she cared about. Naruko picked up the book. It was a modest black leather tome titled Advanced Seal Theory. She opened the first few pages and was instantly intrigued. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary manual on sealing techniques. But a closer look revealed a wealth of handwritten notes in the margins, charts, diagrams, and detailed explanations expanding on the content. Every seal described had been analyzed with improvements or unique applications suggested. On the first page, the initials MN were scrawled neatly. Whoever the author was, they clearly had exceptional insight into seal crafting. Naruko made a mental note to study it thoroughly later. For now, she had something else in mind. Oh, and Gigi, I have a gift for you. She announced with her trademark grin, bright and mischievous. I figured out a way to solve your paperwork problem. At those words, the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, dropped his pipe in surprise, his eyes wide. 2 words, shadow clones, she said, turning on her heel and leaving the office with her scrolls and the book in hand. Behind her, she heard a loud thud as Sarutobi let his head drop to the desk, mumbling in disbelief. Naruko laughed cheerfully and headed home. It was time to begin her next phase of training. 3 weeks later, 7 a.m., outskirts of Konoha. Following their last mission, Team 7 had been given a week off for rest and recovery. Naruko took this chance to train outside the village. After notifying the Hokage and placing a tracking seal on herself, one only the old man could trace, she packed her supplies and set out. Training was one reason, but not the only one. Today was October 9th, and tomorrow marked the annual Kyubi festival, celebrating the bravery of the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze. While the village saw it as a day of pride, it meant something entirely different to Naruko. For several years now, she had chosen to leave the village during this time, preferring the peace and safety of solitude. She smiled quietly as she passed through the gates, documents checked by Kotetsu and Izumo, the ever-watchful tuning guards. She appreciated them, they treated her with courtesy and never gave her trouble. Her chosen training spot was a secluded clearing about a 2-hour run from Konoha. As she traveled, she reflected on the past few weeks. Team 7 had completed another C-rank mission along with several D-rank ones, giving her enough earnings to stock up on sealing materials and maintain her sword. Her advanced training was still a secret, except to her sensei. She had confided in Kakashi and asked him to keep it quiet. He agreed with a nod and one of his iconic eye smiles. Sakura was unaware, and Sasuke. Well, he likely noticed something had changed, but Naruko wasn't too concerned. She stepped off the road and made her way to the familiar clearing. The forest welcomed her with calming silence, a rare and peaceful contrast to the usual noise of village life. Naruko sometimes wondered what she had seen in Sakura. The girl could be rather loud at times. Perhaps Sasuke's aloof attitude was a way to avoid the constant attention. She might have to talk to him about it. Not that he would say much in return. The clearing finally appeared, and Naruko put her thoughts aside. Training came first. She carefully set down her bag and began unpacking the gear she would need. A week's worth of food pills, along with a small box of chakra-enhancing pills, emergency use only. She had learned the importance of preparation through experience. "All right, let's begin," she said, standing tall. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In a burst of chakra, 100 identical clones appeared, each with a confident smile. "Okay. I want 50 of you climbing trees while balancing leaves on every fingertip. 30 of you, practice water walking and do the same leaf exercise. The rest, start reading the books and scrolls." As her clones dispersed, Naruko sat down cross-legged to meditate. She tied her headband over her eyes to block out sight and began sharpening her other senses. First, she focused on sound, the gentle flow of the nearby river. She isolated the different noises, water slipping over rocks, small creatures nearby, rustling leaves. She even tried to identify the tree species by the sound their leaves made in the wind. Kyuubi's training methods were unconventional, but remarkably effective. Though the fox spirit was sealed inside her, its guidance had helped her develop a unique and powerful sensory style. She concentrated a small amount of chakra to her ears, enhancing her perception even further. At one point, this much input would have overwhelmed her, but she had grown stronger. With vision blocked, she sharpened her awareness of everything else. Once the meditation was complete, she stood and summoned another clone. "Grab a handful of leaves," she instructed. She unsealed her sword from a storage seal on her arm, its placement designed for swift access using minimal chakra. Her goal was precision and speed. She was developing a combat style she called Radiance, a blend of swordsmanship, chakra perception, and stealth. Within a 5-foot radius, she could project her chakra in a sphere that helped her detect everything within. It was nearly impossible to surprise her within that range. "Start with one leaf," she whispered, hand resting on the sword now strapped across her back. She could now draw it fluidly with one hand, though fighting that way was still challenging. She focused. The leaf began to fall. The moment it entered her sensory field, she moved, drawing her sword and slicing it cleanly in half. "2 leaves," she said softly, her tone calm and concentrated. Dash. Several kilometers east, sundown. Anko Mitarashi moved wearily through the forest. Today had not gone as planned. A mission based on flawed intel had forced her into an exhausting retreat. Despite torn gear and aching muscles, she pressed on. She wasn't out of the woods yet, literally and figuratively, but she refused to give up. Her mind was foggy, her strength fading. She leaned against a tree, struggling to stay alert. Just when she thought she might lose consciousness, she saw a figure running toward her, cloaked in shadow against the setting sun. And then, her vision went dark. For a while, all she knew was stillness. Is this the end? Naruko idly wondered as some sense of awareness returned to her. There was no pain, just a gentle warmth at first, but that sensation quickly gave way to discomfort. She groaned softly as she opened her eyes. She attempted to sit up, but her body lacked the strength. Nearby, she noticed a young boy, perhaps 5 years her junior. His spiky blonde hair stood out, kept in place by a forehead protector engraved with the symbol of the Hidden Leaf Village. Whisker-like markings decorated his cheeks. Where have I seen him before? She thought. His outfit was practical, black cargo pants full of pockets, black boots with reinforced toes, and a red shirt. She soon realized the white and black trench coat covering her likely belonged to him. The boy was asleep, his breathing steady. What drew her attention next were the numerous markings on his arms, tattoos, perhaps, which were probably usually hidden under the sleeves of his coat. Looking around, she noticed that she was in a tent. Her gear had been carefully arranged within reach, whatever could be salvaged had been gathered neatly. "You're awake," said the boy, eyes still closed. She opened her mouth to respond, but he gently interrupted, "Don't speak yet, and don't try to move. Your body's still too weak. You're safe here. Rest, we can talk tomorrow." She found herself mildly annoyed by his calm assertion, but she knew he was right. With a reluctant sigh, she allowed herself to drift back to sleep. What do you make of that seal on her shoulder, Q? Naruko asked with curiosity, examining the drawn replication of the seal through her notes. "Cursed seal. Life type," replied QB, her inner companion. "I'm still learning how to analyze those," Naruko admitted, "but I've identified a few components. One seems to be a chakra conversion seal, it's got some odd characteristics. Another reminds me of certain suppressive seals I read about in one of the scrolls. Should I ask her about it? I doubt it's something she'd want to talk about openly." "You can ask," QB said calmly. "Just don't push her." Naruko's train of thought paused as she noticed movement. Though she didn't know the woman's name, her attire clearly identified her as a jounin of the Hidden Leaf. From her tools and poisons, it was clear she wasn't on Boo, but rather on a high-level reconnaissance or infiltration mission. Despite her youth, Naruko had long understood that the shinobi world wasn't defined by black and white, but by shades of gray. It would be unwise to judge people too quickly. She had learned that lesson well. She poured a bowl of warm stew and approached the woman as she slowly sat up. "Hungry?" she asked gently, offering the bowl and a spoon. "Thank you," the woman replied gratefully, accepting the meal. They ate together in silence, each quietly studying the other. Naruko, who was usually known for her enthusiastic eating habits, exercised unusual restraint. Something about this woman's presence made her want to be more composed. "So," Naruko ventured once the meal was done, "I'm glad you're all right." "Thanks for saving me," the woman replied, looking down slightly. She sounded reluctant, as though she wasn't used to expressing gratitude. "No need to thank me," Naruko said with a small smile. "We're both from the Leaf, right?" She grinned awkwardly, rubbing the back of her head. The woman looked at her strangely for a moment. "I'm Naruko Uzumaki," she said, extending her hand. "Anko Mitarashi," came the response as she accepted the handshake. That small exchange seemed to break the tension. Titles and ranks felt meaningless for the moment as they chatted casually over food and tea. In the background, one could see Naruko's shadow clones busily training, some practicing jutsu, others exercising or studying. Naruko found herself enjoying Anko's company. There was something unpolished about her, perhaps a bit sharp at the edges, but she gave the impression of someone deeply honest, someone who had been through a lot. There was still one matter Naruko couldn't let go of. "Hey, Anko-san," she began hesitantly. "Do you mind if I ask you something?" Her tone shifted to one of sincere curiosity. "Go ahead," Anko replied cautiously. "You've seen the seal." "Hi. I didn't want to make you uncomfortable, but I was hoping you'd tell me a bit about it." Anko gave her a thoughtful look. She seemed surprised at the innocent nature of the question, as if Naruko were a child trying to understand something complicated. She sighed and shook her head lightly. "All right. Ask." Naruko immediately pulled out a scroll and pen, ready to take notes. "First, who created it?" Anko winced. "Orochimaru," she said simply. "What does it do?" Naruko asked gently. "It draws chakra forcibly. The problem is, it corrupts the chakra and harms the user in the process, mentally and physically. It also allows Orochimaru to cause harm remotely using the seal." Naruko nodded and wrote furiously. "That's troubling," she muttered. "He's clearly intelligent, but that doesn't make what he did right." Anko studied Naruko closely, surprised at her level of insight. She hadn't expected such depth from someone younger. "So? What have you figured out about it?" she asked, curious. "All right," Naruko began, switching to lecture mode. "The seal is actually a combination of multiple arrays. First, there's a chakra converter and amplifier, then there's a soul-linked component, likely a fragment of his essence that corrupts the chakra and keeps the bearer bound. Then there's a control mechanism, possibly a suppressive seal, and something that affects mental clarity. Lastly, there's an additional dormant seal, and a marking with energy traits I associate with summoning contracts or bonds. It could be what's giving off that unusual energy signature." Anko's eyes widened. Even the Hokage didn't break it down that clearly. Naruko blinked, confused. Any decent sealing practitioner should be able to recognize the layers. You helped by explaining how it affects you. Removing it is complicated, but changing it? That's possible. Anko raised an eyebrow. You can alter it? Yes, Naruko replied. Not all of it, but many of the more harmful components can be disabled or overwritten. For a moment, Anko's guard dropped. In her brown eyes, Naruko saw something familiar: loneliness, uncertainty, emotional wounds buried under strength. It was a reflection of her own experience. Want to know something? Naruko asked, her voice soft. Anko nodded. Naruko lifted her shirt slightly and channeled a small amount of chakra. A large, intricate seal appeared on her stomach. You're, Anko whispered. Naruko nodded. Yes. I'm the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. There was a moment of silence. Do you dislike me now? Naruko asked hesitantly. Anko looked at her for a long moment, then gently touched her shoulder. Of course not. You helped me. How could I feel anything but respect? They both laughed, softly at first, then with a growing sense of release. There was comfort in knowing you weren't alone. Eventually, as the sun rose higher, Naruko stood and stretched. I need to get in some training. I'll take you back to the village later today, all right? I'm not helpless, you know, Anko said, pouting slightly. Naruko chuckled. I know. But you're recovering. Let me help. I'll send a message ahead. Anko nodded reluctantly. She was not used to being cared for gently. As Naruko resumed her physical training, she left a shadow clone behind to assist Anko if needed. Anko rested, watching the clones train. She marveled at Naruko's intense routine, chakra control, technique practice, physical endurance, and even academic study. Few people her age trained with such determination. Why does she push herself so hard? Anko murmured. One of the clones glanced over before vanishing with a light puff of smoke. You'll have to ask the real one, it said. Anko stared after it thoughtfully, then chuckled to herself. Later that day, after sending a secure message back to the Hokage via a summoned snake messenger, Anko leaned back and allowed herself to rest. She had made a decision: Naruko Uzumaki was someone worth knowing. Not just for her strength, but for her heart. And in a world that often felt dark and uncertain, that meant more than she could say. Training with precision, Naruko's new technique. Naruko was fully engaged in developing a new technique involving her oversized sword. She had already concluded that simply swinging it wouldn't be enough. The collection of intricate seals etched into the blade was remarkable. From her analysis, it was clear that its previous wielder, Zabuza, had barely tapped into its true potential. The chakra reinforcement and sharpening seals kept the weapon in perfect condition without the need for maintenance, enabling it to slice cleanly through armor. Most of the seals were related to chakra manipulation, but one particularly stood out: it created a chakra shell around the blade. Another seal was more enigmatic. Naruko, while familiar with both basic and some advanced seals, wasn't yet at the level of a sealing arts master. Recognizing a seal was one thing, deconstructing or creating one was an entirely different challenge. The final seal was a chakra channeling type, but coupled with a mysterious symbol she couldn't decipher. She realized she'd need an expert's help. The technique she was attempting focused on gathering a high concentration of chakra to form a durable shell around the sword. On contact, this shell would discharge its energy in a localized burst. Fortunately, she had managed to figure out how to release the chakra in a controlled way. The only challenge left was performing the technique safely. Nearby, Anko watched with growing curiosity as Naruko took off her jacket and unsealed the large sword. Anko's surprise was evident. Everyone beyond Jinan level had access to the bingo book, and it didn't take much effort to recognize one of the legendary swords of the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist. Even more surprising, it was being wielded by a 13-year-old. Hey kid, where did you get that sword? Anko asked, genuinely intrigued. From its former owner, Naruko replied calmly, causing Anko to pause for a moment. Actually, Anko, I could use your help with something. Anko raised a brow, waiting for her to elaborate. I need you to throw kunai and shuriken at me, Naruko said with complete seriousness, as she pulled her headband down to cover her eyes. Anko considered whether Naruko was completely serious, but she hadn't had any real fun in a while. All right, she said with an amused grin. Any ground rules? Naruko exhaled slowly, aware of the risk. 1 projectile at a time, 3-second intervals. From when I say now until I say stop. Use my gear if you run low. Anko chuckled lightly. Naruko, on the other hand, started to feel nervous. Still, she trusted Anko to give her an honest challenge, without going overboard. "Now," Naruko shouted. There was a brief pause, then she sensed a kunai entering her chakra field, aimed for her head. A swift, controlled motion of her blade deflected it. 2 seconds later, a shuriken followed, this time aiming for her neck. The barrage continued for several minutes until Anko had used up the entire supply of tools. Anko was stunned. How had Naruko, blindfolded, blocked every projectile so precisely? She wasn't from the Hyuga clan, so the Byakugan was out. She had yet to figure out the secret behind Naruko's skill. As they gathered the scattered weapons, Naruko spoke up again. "Let's make it 2 at a time now, with 1-second breaks. Okay?" Anko winced slightly at her unwavering tone. Naruko was clearly fatigued, but still determined. "All right. But be careful," Anko said, a hint of concern in her voice. Naruko took a deep breath to refocus. Now was the true test of her progress. Now. Immediately, 2 kunai flew toward her. With minimal movement, she maneuvered the sword to block both. More projectiles followed in quick succession. Naruko sidestepped a lower kunai and blocked one heading for her upper body. The challenge continued, and although it lasted only a few minutes, it took a great deal out of her. She finally raised her headband back up and gave Anko a tired, but genuine smile. Anko, still holding a few kunai, looked at her with astonishment and quiet admiration. "You're incredibly talented," she whispered softly, clearly impressed. "Thanks for your help, Anko-san. If there's anything I can do in return." Naruko trailed off politely. "Tell me how you did that," Anko asked, genuinely curious. Naruko grinned. "Only if you promise not to tell anyone besides the Hokage." Anko nodded. "All right. Here's the secret," Naruko began quietly. "I project a thin layer of chakra around me, like a sensing field. It acts as an extra sense when I combine it with my chakra tracing skills and heightened hearing." Anko's eyes widened in amazement. It was a straightforward concept, but executed brilliantly. "Don't spread this around," Naruko added. "This isn't listed in my record, and it's only a portion of the technique. It's still incomplete." "Incomplete?" Anko asked. "Yeah," Naruko said with a small sigh. "I can't use my eyes for it yet. My concentration isn't quite where it needs to be." Anko thought to herself, if she can use 6 chakra-enhanced senses like this, her awareness must be nearly flawless. Their conversation was gently interrupted. "We should probably get going," Naruko said softly. "Yeah," Anko replied, casting a thoughtful look toward her. Naruko gathered her equipment and began walking with Anko back toward Konoha. She hadn't planned to return so soon, but there were a few things she needed to discuss with Kakashi and the 3rd Hokage anyway. Dear YouTube family. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching and being a part of this journey. If you enjoyed the content, please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel and stay connected. Your support means the world. Until next time, stay safe, stay inspired, and keep chasing your passions. With gratitude. 6 Path Weeb.